a red bird flew into a high mimosa tree, and one of the macaw people looked up at the macaw and said, "You don't look so good. You need a tail." So the red macaw flew down, and another bird stuck a tail into him. It was the small black tail of the mutu bird, and somebody gave the mutu a red gaudy tail. The red macaw flew back into the tree, and those on the ground shouted, "It still doesn't look so good." So once again the red macaw flew back down, but this time he told the mutu to fly up into the tree. He then said to the mutu, "No, that does not look good. Your body is all gray, but you have a long red tail." So the mutu and the quoro decided to exchange tails. The quoro then flew back up into the tree, and all said, "Now it looks good. You must always remain in the mimosa tree."
There are two types of Waiwai headdresses, feather diadems and feather crowns. Diadems are constructed by lashing feathers onto a circular band. Brilliant orange feathers of the toucan and the cock of the rock are used in combination with fruit crow feathers, simulating the intensity and radiant glow of the sun. Feather crowns are fashioned from rows of curacao, or toucan and macaw feathers. The feathers are tied to cotton cords, forming the base of the headdress. The arrangement of feathers worn by the Waiwai reflects the upper, middle, and lower realms inhabited by the different birds. White harpy eagle feathers from the upper skies top magnificent headpieces. The middle body is adorned with the feathers of red macaws and toucans from the lower skies. Hanging below the belt are the black feathers of the ground-dwelling curacao. Contemporary Festival. Years ago, villages were small and greatly dispersed. People traveled over great distances to attend festivals. Today, Waiwai villages are large and made up of many different language groups. Festival goers may have to travel only as far as the next neighborhood to attend a feast. The village chief calls for a festival about a month before it is held. In preparation for a festival, volunteer hostesses offer to prepare manioc bread and drinks for the event. Some men volunteer to go on a collective hunt. They volunteer by saying, "I'll go," meaning I accept my responsibility to shoot game for the festival. The hunters who volunteer are given manioc bread prepared by the hostesses. They take the bread and proceed into the forest to fulfill their obligation. Nowadays, the collective hunt occurs twice a year, around Christmas and Easter, and may last for 10 days. After the hunt, and before entering the village, the men bathe, rub oil in their hair, and decorate themselves with paint and white feather down. Much of the elaborate feather work worn years ago has been abandoned for brightly colored shirts. Waiwai interpret their own use of Western clothes as another example of their ability to incorporate and control outside resources. After beautifying themselves, the men make their first ritualized entry into the village. Making lots of noise, whistling, striking arrows on bows, and shouting, the hunters make their way toward the village plaza. With freshly killed game hanging from their belts, the men circle the plaza, then enter the communal house. Here the leader gives a speech, telling the women and children of the dangers and challenges they faced in the forest. He then leads a prayer of thanksgiving. For an anthropologist account of the hunter's return from the forest, touch the feather icon. Catherine Howard has observed several Waiwai festivals. In the summer of 1991, while working on the University Museum's exhibit, she commented on the hunter's return from the forest.
Then the leader makes a speech to the women about the hunt and talks about how high their hopes had been for how much game they would be able to bring back, and he apologizes for, in fact, how little and what poor quality of game that they were able to bring back. there's a certain kind of irony and self-mockery to all of this, because in fact they have brought back many, many hundreds of pounds of meat that will last the entire festival.
High in the rafters of the communal house are perched wooden sculptures of birds and other animals. Hunters use the sculptures as targets to reenact the hunt for the women. Shooting arrows at the wooden birds and animals, the men demonstrate their skills in meeting the challenges of the hunt and bringing back food to nourish everyone. The fresh-killed meat is piled on the floor in the center of the communal house. On everyday occasions, a hunter gives fresh-killed game to his wife or mother-in-law. But on festival days, meat is distributed to everyone in the village, regardless of kinship ties. Hostesses retrieve the game from the center of the floor and prepare it in their homes. Later, when the meat is cooked, it will be shared collectively. The hunters make a second ritual entry into the village. This time they blow bark trumpets, just like the visitors used to do when arriving for a shodewika festival. The hunters all carry heavy backpacks filled with smoked meat, enough to feed the entire village for 4 to 6 days. They tie smoked birds in front of their bark trumpets and decorate them with feather ornaments. Everybody laughs at the joke of seeing animals wearing human ornaments. They also laugh at the hunters when they masquerade as animals or drape game over their heads. Sometimes they make wigs, beards, and chest hair of fur to poke fun of non-Indians, whom the Waiwai consider as hairy as animals. In the feast house, the hostesses greet the hunters with bowls of tapioca drink. After all the men have drunk from the bowls of all the hostesses, the packs of smoked meat are piled up high, and the hostesses pick which ones they will be responsible for cooking. Today, celebrations involve neighborhoods rather than villages from afar, but reasons for holding festivals remain unchanged. They are a time to celebrate relationships and interactions between people and environment. They mark phases in the agricultural season of clearing and harvesting new gardens through collective labor. They are a time to demonstrate their abilities to acquire sustenance from forests and sky. Finally, they celebrate Waiwai skills of integrating foreign goods, powers, and people into their own society. Gardening. Gardening is largely women's work, but men clear the forest for new gardens and help plant. Clearing garden plots takes place during the dry season. Since Waiwai villages are located north and south of the equator, dry seasons vary depending upon location. They may extend from November to January in some locations, and from March to May in others. Not just any swath of land is chosen for a garden. Selecting a site requires care and skill. Concern must be given to access, the forest's canopy above, as well as to the quality of the soil. The best suited soil turns simply, is easily weeded, and affords good drainage. A traditional garden plot may be as small as half an acre or as large as 3 acres. It may take 3 or 4 days of hard work to clear a plot of vines, saplings, and other underbrush. Then the larger hardwood trees can be felled. A Waiwai axeman selects key trees positioned in a way that causes their upper branches to take down other trees as they fall. This is a great labor-saving technique, considering each tree is brought down with a hand axe. In 1913, John Ogilvie, a Scottish settler living in the Amazon, observed the Waiwai method of felling trees. For his description and a diagram from his unpublished manuscript, touch the feather icon.
This first cut is made to within a reasonably close distance of the center of the tree. Then a new V cut on the opposite side is made. The level of this cut must be some 3 inches above that already made to ensure easier felling and less work. But the cut is only made to about 1/3 of the tree's diameter, thus leaving 1/4 to 1/3 of the bowl uncut. The cuts, when finished, should resemble diagram number 1. The tree is left standing, and the Indian tackles every tree in the proposed clearing. He then begins to work on the master or key tree in the same way, but this he severs completely so as to fall in the direction chosen. With a mighty crash, down goes the key tree, carrying in front of it the whole field of partially severed trees like so many skittles.
The felled vegetation is left to dry in the hot sun of the dry season. 2 months later, it is set afire. Amazonian soils are poor in nutrients. The vitamins and minerals so vital to cultivated crops are contained not in the soil, but in the living plants and trees. Cutting and burning vegetation improves the soil's fertility by releasing nutrients into the soil. Unlike the colonists, the Indians only burn small plots, so the forest recovers quickly. Once the ground covering is burned, tropical weeds spring up seemingly overnight. The forest immediately begins to reclaim the area under cultivation, and within a few years, weeds overwhelm the plot, and the soil is again so depleted of nutrients that it is necessary to start a new garden. Sweet potatoes, yams, bananas, sugarcane, and papaya are all grown in Waiwai gardens, but manioc is the most important crop of all. Manioc is a root crop, a tuber that looks something like an enormous potato. It is made into bread and drinks and is part of every meal, and has an important role in ritual exchanges. Manioc drinks are at the center of any feast and are among the key ingredients at inter-village festivals. Processing manioc is the responsibility of women, but gardening requires a balance of effort. It is the cooperative labor of men and women that transforms the wild forest into cultivated Waiwai gardens. Festivals celebrate the productivity of this cooperation. Tapioca is a drink made from manioc and palm fruits and offered to visitors as they enter the village from the forest. Hunting. The diversity of animal species in the Amazon forest is richer than anywhere in the world, and the Waiwai eat from a wide variety of mammals, reptiles, fish, and birds. Waiwai distinguish between 2 kinds of prey, meat eaters and non-meat eaters. Most meat eaters are avoided as a food source, but are hunted for their skins, claws, teeth, and feathers, which are used to make ornaments or musical instruments. Non-meat-eating animals provide the meal of choice and are eaten whenever available. A tapir is a catch that may yield 100 to 200 pounds of meat or more. An agouti may yield only 3 pounds of meat, yet it is considered the tastiest meat of all. Various species of rodents, lizards, wild pig, deer, monkey, tortoise, and some birds, including curassow and guan, are also hunted for food. To hear an anthropologist's impressions about the abundance of game, touch the feather icon. The Danish anthropologist Niels Falk made his first field trip to South America in 1954. In December 1990, he discussed that early field experience while looking at photos he made on the trip.
It's the first time I really saw wild animals in flocks and going down the small rivers, Mapuera sources and monkeys howling and tapirs splashing in the water, things you can really not imagine really is happening because you come so quietly with these Indians in the canoes and alligators on the banks and everything is there. So that's quite fantastic. And then, of course, you get a marvelous way into their stories. You make a turn The river bend, and there you see something. You see a blue arrow, Shafi flying along. Well, you get the story about it and how it came about and why it is blue instead of red.
Men usually hunt with dogs. Hunters in pairs or small groups leave the village in the early morning and return by early afternoon. The forest foliage is heavy and the floor is dark, shielded from the sun by the great forest canopy. Locating and shooting game requires knowledge and great skill. Among all the sounds of the forest, insects buzzing, birds screaming, monkeys howling, branches and twigs falling, a good hunter can recognize the slightest sound made by his prey. He knows the direction from where the sound came. He knows how far it is, and he knows which creature made it. Tapirs are the largest land mammals in South America. Paddling down a river, hunters with their dogs go ashore when fresh tapir tracks are spotted along the river's bank. The men go ashore and listen for the call of the mashwarini, the tapir bird. The mashwarini feeds on ticks picked off the skin of the tapir. Hearing the call of the tapir bird, hunters mimic the sound. The bird responds with an answer. The process is repeated until the bird leads the hunters and their dogs to their quarry. The dogs take over and chase the large mammal back into the river. The hunters then approach and with bow and arrow kill their prey. For information on Waiwai hunting dogs, touch the feather icon. Hunting dogs are one of the Waiwai's prized possessions. Waiwai are famous for their dogs, and they are traded throughout a large region to many other groups. Most of the Waiwai dogs are trained to be highly effective hunters. Hunting dogs have long muzzles, attesting to their keen sense of smell, and are slim and long-legged, well suited to travel through the dense forest. Waiwai paint their hunting dogs with red anato to protect them from forest spirits and insect pests. Before a hunt, dogs are sometimes tied near a wasp's nest to make the dog furious when released. But the Waiwai love their dogs and take excellent care of them, even to the point of pampering them. The dogs repay the treatment with fierce loyalty and obedience. Fish are the most abundant source of protein in the Amazon and Guyana regions. There are over 2,000 species swimming in the local waters, but the Waiwai make use of only a few species. The Waiwai use several methods to catch fish. Men shoot them with bow and arrows from canoes or river banks, and sometimes from platforms made of saplings erected in shallow and calm waters. A variety of traps are also used to capture big and medium-sized fish. On occasion, fish are poisoned. Men, women, and children all participate in a fish poisoning, and the event is a very sociable occasion. Poison is made from certain species of vines that are pounded and shredded to release the sap. The shreds are placed into baskets and dunked in the river. Fish poison is not a true poison. There is an active ingredient in the sap that affects the oxygen in the water, making it impossible for fish to breathe. They become stupefied, and as they float to the surface, women and children rush into the water, picking up the small fish as men spear the larger ones. Manioc. Manioc bread is the essential component of all meals. Tapioca drink and manioc beer, both made from manioc, are key ingredients of any festival and are consumed in large quantities. Manioc is woman's work, and Waiwai women spend a good deal of their time planting, harvesting, processing, toasting, and brewing it. Waiwai say when a chief's wife dies, he can no longer hold festivals because he has no one to process manioc. Women often begin their day in the garden plots. Early in the morning they work the soil, pulling weeds and tending crops. While harvesting the daily supply of manioc tubers, women plant sticks cut from the manioc plants back into the same mounds from which they dug the tubers. The cuttings will mature and yield a new crop of tubers in 9 to 12 months. Mature manioc can remain in the ground without spoiling for 18 months, and it is harvested only as needed. An inter-village festival requires large quantities of manioc. Women, aided by children and sometimes men, harvest manioc in great quantities and transport it back to the village in canoes. Raw manioc tubers are highly poisonous. The tubers must be peeled, grated, squeezed, dried, sifted, cooked, and made into bread and tapioca drink. The manioc is grated on wooden grater boards. The boards are embedded with hundreds of small, sharp stones. The small, tooth-like stones shred the manioc into a wet and pulpy mash. 4 women working together can peel and grate over 250 pounds of tubers in 7 hours. All the women and girls work together all day long for about 2 weeks to prepare manioc for a major celebration. The white flesh of the manioc root contains hydrocyanic acid, a deadly poison. A complex process of washing, draining, squeezing, drying, and cooking is needed to separate the poison from the manioc pulp. After thorough washing and draining, the pulp is stuffed into a long, flexible basket and hung from a rafter in the workhouse. A long pole is inserted through a loop on the bottom of the basket. The pole serves as a lever, and the basket is stretched until its manioc contents are squeezed dry. The manioc is removed, pulverized, and sifted into flour. Toasted into bread on a large griddle over a hot fire, the manioc bread is laid out on platforms or on a thatched roof to dry in the sun. Crisp, thin manioc bread will keep for months without spoiling. It is the only food that will keep in tropical heat. Shodewika. A Waiwai inter-village festival, or shodewika, is a time of great joyfulness. Visitors and guests gather to share food and drink, celebrating beauty, productivity, and ties between people of different villages. To begin a festival, a chief calls upon the men and women of his village to prepare for the arrival of guests. A large festival may host 100 people, all of whom must be fed and housed. A festival may last for several days, and hosts must have enough food and drink to accommodate everyone. Festivals are held once or twice a year. They take place during dry seasons, a time when fruits and meat are plentiful. Traditionally, when a village chief decided to hold a shodewika, he sent a messenger with a batch of knotted strings to the invited village. Strings are used as guest invitations and calendars announcing the day of the event. Dyed strings are tied into rows of knots. The knots mark the number of days the guests need to prepare for the feast and to travel to the host village. Each day, one knot is untied. The last knot marks the day beginning the festival. Upon arriving in the invited village, the messenger recites an oho, a yes chant, to the village chief. My leader sends me, oho, to invite you to come and drink, oho. Let everyone come who wants, oho, and everybody who doesn't want to come, stay home. For an anthropologist's account of the importance of a shodewika, touch the feather icon. In his office at the University of Copenhagen in December 1990, Niels Falk was asked to look at photographs made on his 1954-55 field trip among the Waiwai. While looking over the photos, his comments were recorded.
Well, the feast, that's for instance shodewika. It's a social gathering, and what is important, however, is that new people are coming to your little village, and this village is isolated, and You might have young women who are not married, for instance, who need to get accustomed to somebody within this very small Waiwai group. And of course, this is one of the aims of the social gatherings, to get married and so on, and have a good time and drink a lot of beer and eat nice food, of course. But I mean, the shodewika myth also tells us that the importance of these gatherings is to get married, to get people into your tiny village and to keep them there.
Upon receiving the strings, the chief distributes them to villagers. Invited guests immediately begin to assemble trade goods of beads, baskets, fish hooks, arrows, grading boards, and loincloths. A festival is not only the best time to find a marriage partner, it is also the best time to conduct trade. I want your hair too. So I came. You live here. Have lots of beads. You can make another one. With great anticipation, hunters from the invited village enter the forest to shoot game and collect fresh iti leaves. Leaves are made into strips, bundled, and later will be fashioned into dance costumes. On the appointed day, trade items, meat and costumes, are loaded into canoes, and women, children, men, and dogs begin the journey to the host village. As the guests are preparing, so too are the hosts. Men repair roof thatching on the feast house and erect shelters for their guests. Women and children clear weeds from the central plaza for dances and ritual games. But the women spend most of their time preparing enough manioc bread and drink to feed the entire village and their guests. Women in the host village begin to make manioc bread and drink. Accompanied by their children, women dig up manioc roots and transport them to the village where they are scraped, grated, brewed into drink, and toasted into bread. Making manioc is women's work, and manioc is so important that when a chief's wife dies, Waiwai say he can no longer be chief because he has nobody to make manioc drink for the festival. The guests dance into the village from the forest like the animal people in Waiwai mythology and are offered the very human foods of manioc bread and drink. A shodewika begins at sunset. By early afternoon, partygoers stop near the host village and prepare for the festival. They eat a snack and bathe in the river. Men and women coat their bodies with red annatto, oil their hair, and garnish it with eagle down. Men elaborately paint their faces and adorn themselves with featherwork or dress up in ET leaf costumes. Women dress in beautiful bead aprons, necklaces, and ear tassels. In the host village, men, women, and children dress in their best paints, feathers, and beads, and gather in the communal house and the village plaza. When the guests are fully prepared, the men pick up backpacks of game. Women and children gather their belongings, and all proceed unseen and unheard toward the host village. According to custom, people in the village pretend to know nothing of the impending arrival of their guests. At sunset, just beyond the village edge, the guests begin to blow on bark trumpets and start their dance into the village. Dancers whose bodies are hidden in ET leaf capes as they impersonate spirits of the forest follow dance leaders around the village plaza. In the center of the circle, the chief of the host village, master of the drink, offers male participants bowls filled with manioc beer. Dancers sway back and forth in circular movements. Soon men from the host village, fully adorned in paint and feathers, and women in dance attire, join in. All dance until exhausted. For days to follow, celebrants sing, dance, and enact games. Families make trades. Some will lead to marriages. But the majority of visitors proudly return home with their newly acquired trade items, and begin plans to host their shodewika. Inter-village festivals integrate groups into a regional social system. Celebrants with painted bodies, adorned with beautiful feather ornaments and glass beads, display their abilities to draw resources from nature and other people. Familiar things are traded for foreign objects. Visitors are encouraged to remain in the village through marriage. Festivals serve to assimilate new people with new skills into the village, assuring growth and prosperity. A shodewika is a chance for a village to show its generosity, productivity, and beauty. Guests are called upon to see, admire, join in, and celebrate. Society. Among the Waiwai, leaders exercise power, not through commands or coercion, but through persuasion, eloquence, generosity, and example. Village leaders are no wealthier than anyone else, nor do they escape the same work obligations expected of everybody. They are simply the first among equals. The Waiwai sometimes call their chief the keeper of the drink, which refers to his responsibilities to sponsor festivals. As the founder of a village, he is referred to as the one who went first, since he is the one who chose the site. The chief is also sometimes described as the tree of the village, its firm central support. Besides the chief, there are two other kinds of leaders: shamans and work leaders, who are responsible for mobilizing village labor for collective projects like clearing garden land, building houses, and preparing for feasts. Traditionally, shamans mediated between members of the village and the spirit population of the forest and skies. Nowadays, many of his roles have been assumed by the church pastor. In addition to the three types of leaders, there are many occasions for temporary leaders to emerge and exercise leadership, whether it be to settle a family dispute or to become a hostess at a feast. Women's roles in public positions of power are much more muted than the roles assumed by men. Women extend their influence only over other women. Their source of influence is largely by virtue of being the wives of village leaders. Nevertheless, women exercise considerable control at the domestic level. Since the most common residence pattern is for married daughters to live next to their mother's household, a degree of solidarity develops among women that is much stronger than among men. Women consolidate bonds with other households through the all-important work of garden labor and manioc processing. Those with strong personalities have a great deal of leverage in steering their children towards certain marriages and in influencing their husbands' decisions in public affairs. In the public domain, the social roles of men and women are hierarchical. In the domestic realm, they are complementary. Women are responsible for providing food from the gardens. Men are responsible for providing meat from the hunt. Women are potters. Men are weavers. In activities requiring the labor of both sexes, men usually initiate the action, whether it is clearing a garden or killing game. Women process the raw material. Men often add the finishing touches. It can be said that men take the first steps to act upon elements of nature. Women convert the alterations into something human. Men refine it into something social and political.